If your retirement plan doesn't include your body, you don't actually have a retirement plan. Let me ask you a question that your financial advisor has never asked you. What happens to your retirement plan if you get sick? I don't mean a cold. I mean, what happens to your, let's call it $400,000 in savings if you're diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease? What happens to your portfolio if you fall, break a hip, and spend 6 months in a rehab facility? What happens to the retirement that you worked 40 years to build if your body gives out before your money does? The financial industry will sell you every product imaginable: annuities, index funds, long-term care insurance. But there's one investment, one asset that determines whether or not any of that even makes any difference whatsoever. And almost nobody is talking about it. That asset, it's your body. And the metric that matters is not your lifespan. It's what's called your health span. Your lifespan is just a number. Your health span is the quality of every year in that number. It's the difference between living to 85 and actually living to 85. In this video, I'm going to show you with real numbers why your health span is the most important financial investment you can make at all in your retirement. We're going to cover muscle loss, falls, Alzheimer's disease, and by the end, you'll finally understand why the habits you build this week are more important than any stock on Wall Street. If looking at retirement like this is useful to you, would you please like and subscribe so that you won't miss the next retirement assumption that we're going to pressure test together. All right, let's start with something that most people, they don't find out, unfortunately, until it is way too late. You're losing muscle right now, and it's already affecting your retirement math. Starting around age 35 to 40, your body begins losing muscle mass, about 1 to 2% every single year. You know, that doesn't sound like much until you do the math. By age 60, the rate begins to accelerate. You're now losing up to 3% per year. And according to the National Institutes of Health, by age 80, you may have lost 30 to 50% of your peak muscle mass. Now, this condition has a name. It's called sarcopenia. And most people have never, ever heard of it. Here's why this matters for your retirement plan specifically. Muscle, it's not just about strength. Muscle regulates your metabolism. Muscle protects your joints. Muscle keeps you even standing upright. And muscle keeps you independent. Independence, it's not like a lifestyle preference. Independence is a financial strategy. When you lose muscle, you lose stability. When you lose stability, your risk of falling goes up. And when you fall at 70 or 75, the financial consequences can be absolutely catastrophic. The villain here, it isn't just aging. Aging is just time. The villain is the myth, right? The fable that there's nothing you can do about it. Because here's what the research actually shows. Resistance training, even starting out in your 60s or 70s, can meaningfully slow and even partially reverse sarcopenia. You do not have to accept 50% muscle loss as your destiny. But here's the part I really want you to hear. Muscle loss, it doesn't just happen. It happens by default. If you're not actively working against it, it is working against you. The financial parallel is exact. If you don't invest, what happens? Inflation erodes your savings. If you don't train, sarcopenia erodes your independence. Both are slow, invisible, and devastatingly expensive. And speaking of expensive, let me show you exactly what happens when the muscle loss catches up to you. Now, 1 in 4 Americans over 65 will fall this year. And here's what that will cost. Falls are the leading cause of injury, hospitalization, and importantly, your loss of independence for adults 65 and older. Look, that's not my opinion. That's from the National Council on Aging. 1 in 4 older adults fall every single year. Let that settle in. I'm not talking about just stumbling and catching yourself. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about severe injuries, hip fractures, head trauma, and for many people, it's the beginning of the end of living on their own terms. Now, let's talk about the money, because this is where the retirement plan really starts to unravel. If you fall and break a hip, here is what you're looking at, financially at least. The surgery itself, a hip replacement or repair, you're going to run somewhere between $30,000 and $50,000. If you need a hospital stay, add another $10,000 to $20,000. Then comes inpatient rehabilitation, a skilled nursing facility. Average cost, $500 to $1,000 each and every day. The average stay after a hip fracture, 20 to 30 days. That's another $10,000 to $30,000. We're already at between $50,000 and $100,000, and we haven't even talked about what comes next. 1 in 3 people who experience a hip fracture after age 65 never fully return to their prior level of function. Many will require ongoing home care. Many will have to transition to assisted living earlier than they had planned in their retirement plan. Assisted living in America today averages between $4,500 and $6,000 every single month. That's $54,000 to $72,000 every year, and Medicare does not cover it. A single fall, one moment of lost balance can cost $150,000 to $300,000 or more before it's over. Now, I want to ask you something. If I told you that there was a daily habit completely free that significantly reduced your risk of falling, would you do it? Of course you would. Because what I just described is not a health risk. It's a financial catastrophe that happens to have a health warning label on it. The research is clear. Strength training, balance exercises, and regular physical activity will reduce fall risk by 20 to 30%. And some studies show even higher reductions in people who persist, people who stick with it. And here's the compounding effect. Again, no one even talks about this. People who maintain muscle strength and mobility also tend to have what? Better cognitive function. better cardiovascular health. And this is the part that should really just grab your attention. A measurably lower risk of Alzheimer's disease. Now, that brings me to the number I want you to remember, if only one thing from this entire video. What if a 30-minute walk 3 times a week was worth $164,000? Because mathematically, it is. According to researchers at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, daily exercise reduces the risk of developing Alzheimer's disease and dementia by 28 to 45%. Look, let me say that again, because I wanted to make sure it lands. 28 to a 45% reduction. And here's what they found when they really dug in and got specific. Even modest, consistent activity, 35 minutes of moderate exercise 3 times a week, is associated with a 41% lower risk of dementia. Look, if you want to slow cognitive decline, the research shows that even 3,000 to 7,500 steps each and every day can slow cognitive decline by 3 to 7 years. 3 to 7 years of sharp thinking. 3 to 7 more years of knowing your grandchildren's names, of managing your finances on your own, of being the person that you want to be in retirement. Now, let me ask a question. And I want you to think about this the way you'd think about any investment that you were considering. The average total cost to treat Alzheimer's disease over the life of the disease is approximately $400,000. That is not a typo. $400,000 in care cost, facility cost, lost income from a caregiver, a spouse, and everything else that comes with it. Now, if consistent exercise would give you a 41% reduction in Alzheimer's risk, and the cost of Alzheimer's is $400,000, then the expected financial value of that exercise habit, about roughly $164,000. $164,000 from walking. I want you to think about this like a stock tip. Okay, if your broker calls you tomorrow and said, hey, I have an investment that costs you nothing, requires 35 minutes 3 times a week, and has a 41% chance of saving you $400,000, you wouldn't hang up the phone. You would ask, hey, where do I sign? But here's the cruel irony. The financial advice industry doesn't get paid when you take a walk. They get paid when you buy a product. And that's exactly why no one is telling you this. Look, we have no conflict here at Brain Flash. I'm not selling you anything. I'm just giving you the math. And the math says your sneakers might be the most important retirement asset that you even own. But I don't want to just leave you with numbers, because this really isn't about numbers. This is what an actual, vibrant retirement looks like. Think about what a vibrant retirement feels like, what it looks like to you. It's having the energy to care for yourself and not needing somebody else to do it for you. It's getting on the floor to play with your grandchildren and not sitting back and watching from a chair because your knees won't cooperate. It's having the cognitive clarity to still contribute to volunteer, to mentor, to show up in your community as someone who has something to offer. That's not a wellness goal. That's not some fuzzy thing in the future. That's a retirement goal. And you know what? It belongs in your retirement plan just as much as your Social Security date or the withdrawal strategy that you finally land on. A portfolio that funds your needs but doesn't fund your ability to enjoy them is a fragile, fraught with failure retirement plan. A retirement built on both financial confidence and physical vitality, that is an unbreakable retirement plan. And look, here's what I want you to take away from this video. You don't have to be an athlete. You don't have to run marathons. You don't have to join some fancy boutique expensive gym. You need 35 minutes of moderate activity 3 times a week. You need 3,000 to 7,500 steps every day. You need to pick up something heavier than a TV remote a few times a week. These are not heroic asks. They are minimum viable investments in the most important asset that you even own. Look, if this video gave you a new way to think about retirement, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below. Tell me, what's one thing you're going to do this week to invest in your health span? There's a lot of fear in the retirement space. I built this channel to be the alternative, the hope channel, the math channel, the channel that actually believes you have more than you think if you protect what matters most. I'll see you in the next one.